Hello, this is Janet Gowan welcoming you to Love Letters Live. And today is unusual because of our guest, of course, but also because he's in the back seat of a car he's not driving, on his way someplace. And he says it's so LA. I've never heard of it. But anyway, Larry, it's very nice to meet you.
Nice
And
to meet you.
let's just dive right in because I know you have a new book out and you have several. Why don't you just say the name of your book since that's your latest?
Yeah, so the new novel is called Light Man, and
And
it's published by Kearney Street Books and available on Amazon
okay,
and
so
elsewhere.
so people can go there and order it. My question to you is, can we just start with you and just who you are and your upbringing and your family, and tell us a little bit about yourself, like
Sure.
from childhood. And
Okay. I grew up in New York City in the 60s and 70s. Don't want to give my age too specifically, but there it is. And my mother was an actress. My father was a musician, composer. So there's very much a show business family. My mother later became well known for a television series called The Facts of Life. But when I was growing up, she was a theater actress, sometimes struggling. Well, I would say it was always a struggle, although she was fairly successful as things go. But a lot of the shows she did were not. So there was a lot of frustration, and my father was involved in some of those shows.
what
We used to
what
spend summers
what
on
kind of music
Broadway.
did your father compose?
He studied classical composition with Paul Hindemith at Yale,
Wow.
but he also he wrote the theme music for Car 54, Where Are You?
Oh, really?
And the Phil Silvers show. Yeah. I mean, that's Car 54, Where Are You? He will always be known for, even though, he wanted to be a serious composer.
Right. I mean,
And
that Hindemith part strikes me very strongly. But yes, there's something about TV theme songs.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yes.
he actually wrote an opera that was performed on NBC used to have a weekly opera on television, live opera on television. Believe that. And he wrote one. So, he was a fairly accomplished composer. And he later got into sound and then music editing for TV and film, which he had a very long career doing that.
Now,
He was,
what was the road? And then we're going to get to you because
yeah,
really
sure.
about but what was the road that your mother took to end up on Facts of Life, which my daughters were so devoted to? She was such a strong presence. And
Well, she did television early on in New York. She did a lot of television. She was on Car 54, Where Are You? She played. She had several roles on that. And oh no, she was on that show. She was a regular. She was Al Lewis, Al Lewis' character. She was his wife, Sylvia Schnauzer. And then she also did some work on the Phil Silvers show, which my father was also involved with.
I loved that show.
But then she always wanted to be a serious actress. Like that was her goal. The part she was always most proud of was Endgame, Samuel Beckett's Endgame. Not Endgame. I'm sorry, Happy Days. She was also in Endgame. And then but the theater roles just weren't. She just wasn't. They just weren't there for her in the early '70s. And her friends, she had some friends out here in LA, Charles Nelson Riley and Paul Lynde. Paul Lynde was an old friend of hers from college. And they said, you got to come out here. This is where the action is. So she did. She came out for a summer and she did a lot of work. She got on a few shows. I think, what was it? Not the Brady Bunch. Partridge Family she was on, and a couple other shows. I think she did
and
American Style.
How close, and when you talk about she likes serious acting, I consider comedy such well done, such serious acting.
Oh,
And
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think she came to appreciate that also. That, right. A really well written, a funny script needs a good actor, not a
yes,
comedian. I mean, I don't, I find that with movies, when you see a comic, unless unless they learned how to be an actor. And by the way, like Robin Williams was actually trained to be an actor before he was a comic. He was not just a comic who became an actor. But sometimes you see, like, if the acting's not there, it isn't as funny.
right.
It just becomes shtick.
Yes. I mean, it's a very specific talent not to just find yourself in a comedy role just mugging and shrieking, but really bringing. So how close to her facts of life personality was she at home?
I think in some ways she was similar, but in other ways, no. And she would be the first to say she was not that character. That she was, an imperfect person who didn't always have advice for people, and had her insecurities and her just her struggles as a person, and she was always working on herself to become less stressed out. And
Sure,
I mean, the thing is that the life of an actor is, the pressures are enormous.
Right.
She's carrying a show, and I mean, I remember the day she was filming, it was crisis mode.
Was it?
And there was no calmness. Right, she became calm in the character, but that was work.
How did that affect you?
Well, I mean, I remember, well, actually, I didn't live with her for most of that show. I was almost an adult when she got on that show, and so, but the times when she was there, it was, of course, it was not always pleasant, but but I understood. I mean, it was a big deal,
now,
having a show, especially the first few years when they didn't know it was going to succeed.
Yes. What now? You have a brother? You have one brother?
Yes. Yeah.
Older, younger?
I had an older brother. He passed away in 1999. He was developmentally disabled, pretty severely. He had he was autistic, he was epileptic, and and he had some schizophrenia too.
Oh my goodness, that's difficult for the whole family then.
Yeah, I mean, and that was sort of the event of my parents' lives in many ways. Was having to try to deal with that and try to help him.
Who took care of him while your parents were both working?
Well, I mean, my parents had him at home until he was 12, and then he became, he was no longer. Was it 12? Yeah, and then they found a really good place in Pennsylvania that was really good for him, and that he lived in for a few years, and those were probably the best years of his life. And then he became dangerous. He became violent, and he had to be institutionalized. But my parents had been told to institutionalize him when he was little, when he was just a little
did
kid,
that experience
and they refused to do it.
Did that experience with him have an effect on the life shows that you took? I mean, teaching, and did you?
I think so. I mean, I think it taught me patience. I was in order to, and persistence, because in order for me to relate to him, I had to be patient. He was often hard to reach, but if I could reach him, then it was very rewarding. And most often I could reach him through humor. He had a good sense of humor, and I could make him laugh. It is often very basic, childish kind of humor. But
what was the age difference?
He was 3.5 years older than me.
Okay, so that's kind of close.
Right, but I mean, and so of course I was the older brother from the time we were very young, even though he was bigger than me. But I'd say the thing that was most valuable to me as a teacher was seeing that my parents refused to give up on him, even when it seemed just ridiculous that they were still thinking he could get better. They didn't give up. They kept trying. And so that's something that I took from that. And as
That's
a teacher,
wonderful.
I've never given up.
Did you know early,
Yeah, I definitely owe that to them.
did you know early on that you wanted to teach?
Oh, no, I didn't know I wanted to become a teacher till right before I became one, which was
Well,
in my early 30s.
really? What did you do before that?
I was writing. I actually did I used to do some tutoring, so I guess I was already a teacher, but no, I was a writer. I wrote for animated cartoons, and I was just freelancing around. I'd written some books already before I
And you,
became a teacher.
and you have
But
four other novels?
but I just four other novels published, dozens of other ones not published, of
Okay.
course, like any good writer. But my brother, and my experience with him and my parents is sort of the basis of Light Man in many ways, although the story's very different. I mean, the only character that would be really recognizable would be there's the wife of one of the men who the novel centers around is an actress, and she is sort of almost given up on her career because she has a son who has these problems.
So why don't you focus a little bit on that book and tell us about it?
And she answers a cattle call for an insecticide, and and she just nails it. She just improvises on her angst and anger about her son and what's wrong with him, and she just lets it all out on the roaches in the commercial. And she becomes this sensation. She becomes almost like a local folk hero in a city that's overrun with pestilence, which New York was, and probably in some ways still.
You mean actual pestilence or figuratively?
No, figurative. I mean, like the rats and roaches. I mean, it was,
actual.
Actual and figurative. I mean, I don't know if you've ever been in New York subway and seen a rat crawling across.
I've seen them on my driveway. They're all over the place. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Right.
But so that that certainly inspired it, and also just this whole idea of trying to fix a broken son, as I say, this idea of because one of the characters, her husband, Mike, is he's a guy who can fix anything. People in his building bring him broken toasters and blenders, TVs, and he can fix everything, but he can't fix his son, and it's killing him.
Where is that line? That's kind of an interesting line between, and a difficult one, I would imagine, between wanting to fix a broken person and not wanting to fix, but just accept.
Yeah. Well, I think it's hard when it's your child.
Sure.
And it's sometimes, especially if you're not right with yourself, you're not confident in yourself, and you're not sure that you didn't break him in some way, even if it's irrational. I certainly think my parents always felt responsible for everything that happened.
Isn't that awful?
Yeah. And by the way, for my mother, it was not an idea that she had to put in her head, because back then some doctors believed that autism was caused by cold mothering.
I remember that. They were called in the 50s, and they were called refrigerator mothers.
Yes. Exactly.
And how anything could be more cruel. This is a concept that's been bothering me forever, because I knew several people and I don't know why it never occurred to the doctor who finally sees, the psychiatrist or any doctor who finally sees a mother and a child, say of 2 or 3 with autism. And my understanding from my own experience, to even touching a person with autism is painful.
Yes.
It's painful. And I think these mothers have to learn very quickly not to grab and hug and cuddle because it's torture. So
Yeah.
I guess they seem aloof and distant by the time
Yeah.
they get, oh, how stupid of the doctors and the medical
Yeah. It's
community.
just such a, yeah, as you say, it's just so utterly cruel to do that to
It was
someone.
cruel and not intelligent.
No, it wasn't.
well.
It was,
Yes.
oh, well, yeah. So, that's something that,
I didn't realize that he was young at this stage in medical history, yes. Because you
yeah,
didn't give your specific age, which you don't have to.
right.
Yes, okay.
Yeah, yeah. No, I don't mind. He was born in 1955 and I was
Okay,
born
yes.
in 59.
Okay,
So, yeah, he was right at that time.
really? Yes.
Yeah.
Now,
Um,
okay, so he's no longer with us and your parents are both gone, right?
yeah, they're gone.
Okay. So I have a question because I am so largely about letter writing and love letters. And I'm curious, being born when you were, we used to write, were you ever a letter writer as long as you were a writer? Did you write letters to people?
I did not a lot
Mhm.
though.
Well, just to get
Yeah, I'd have to. That's so funny. Yeah.
to get back a little bit.
Go
What
ahead.
what is it you
Yeah.
do teach?
I teach English. I teach writing.
Oh, you do.
Yeah, and I'm always telling students about that, about letters. In fact, one of the plays we read is Arthur Miller's All My Sons,
Hmm.
and I don't know if you're familiar with that play, but there's a brother who's missing in the war. He's actually dead, but the mother thinks he might be coming back, and his fiance and the brother who survived the war are in love with each other, and
Mhm.
it's a problem for the mother. She doesn't, because she believes her other son's coming back. But anyway, they live in separate cities, and then she comes to see him, and there's this kind of awkwardness about whether they're really going to make a go of it. And so I have the students write letters like,
Oh,
well,
good. Okay.
what happened in the 3 years after the war when her family moved from Ohio to New York? How did they, I said, people didn't text each other. They didn't
Right.
see each other on Facebook. He had to have written her a letter.
Yes.
And then she refers to you wrote to me. So we know from the play that he wrote the first letter. And then, one assumes there were a number of letters. So I make them write at least 3 letters back and forth. And, and of course it's very interesting to see they don't understand, like when you're writing a letter to someone you're not talking to on the phone, you're not seeing on the internet, this is a very involved process.
Isn't it
Everything
though?
is on that page. Everything has to be on that page. And, it's a really good exercise for them to try to understand what that means to convey so much in that way.
Do you think that when you're this kind of assignment writing letters, you are kind of you're not talking to the person and you're not, but you are kind of having both sides of the conversation?
Yes, in the letter. Yes, yes, absolutely. And
in your own head.
Right. And I should say, I've in recent years, I've shown students some of the letters my grandmother wrote to my mother, because
you have them. Okay.
My mother saved everything, and I have all these letters. It was one a week for, I don't know, 10 or 15 years.
Oh, my mother and her mother also. It was Tuesdays, right? That's wonderful. So you have them. So what have you learned?
Mother wrote back, but
what have you learned about
say that again?
Family from these letters that you have? Things that you didn't know?
Apparently there were some uncles who went to jail for some shady business. But mostly mostly it's just the details of what I already did know. You know, I knew that, I knew one of my aunts moved to Texas. My mother had moved to New York, and my other aunt stayed in Wisconsin. And so she saw my grandmother all the time, and, and her children grew up with her. And, I just it's just the details, because she would tell her everything she was doing. I mean, there's a whole explanation about buying a girdle.
Oh my goodness.
In one of the letters, it's that kind of stuff. That's the wonderful stuff, not so much the big revelations as just the small details of their lives.
That's a delicious detail, that how to buy a girdle, because I don't think anybody knows about that anymore. No. God bless the 50s. No. Yes. Oh my goodness. Yeah. Now, talk about handwriting for a minute.
Sure.
When you see your mother's handwriting or your grandmother's handwriting, what does that do to you?
Oh, it's kind of an overwhelming feeling to see that, because it's like a person still alive on the page.
That's the point.
It's one thing. I mean, even the words are the person alive, but the handwriting is so much more intimate.
Isn't that something? Yes, it's like the fingerprint of the heart.
Yeah.
Somehow. Yeah. And I'm just thinking, because you are an author, and I don't know if you have the time or the inclination to write letters to people now, but do you ever, I think signing a book, a blank page, wonderful.
I do. I don't handwrite though, although it's funny, I've started handwriting notes just at work when I have to write, like, please excuse someone. I've stopped typing them, and for some reason I have a pad of graph paper and I just scribble them on there. But no, I actually, most of the letters I've written actually are to former students who've been incarcerated. It's the only way to communicate with them. I mean, you can call them on the phone, but it's very expensive, and it's it's kind of awkward and difficult to reach them.
But also, when you have a letter in your hand that someone has sent you, incarcerated, not incarcerated, you have that forever. And the truth is, you can't reread a phone call.
Right. No. It's much better. And then I always put articles and stuff in there for them to read, because I am a teacher. Right. So I get to assign them reading that they actually do, because, they need stuff to do. And that's, and then getting their letters back is always very nice. Although it's also very sad.
Because they're incarcerated.
Yeah. Well, there's one guy right now I believe is not guilty of anything, and he's been on trial. He's been through one trial, and it's been 5 years. He hasn't been convicted of anything, and so that just makes me.
Wait, so he's incarcerated but has not been convicted?
Yeah, he's charged. Yeah, he was charged with a crime, but they're just the district attorneys drags it out. They're not used to. In the system, they're used to people plea bargaining. They're not used to people taking things to trial. Right. And so they have all these tricks to try to force you to make it, a deal. And one of them is they just delay it forever. I mean, I've been to court with him where, the judge is like, okay, let's set the trial date for next month. And the DA says, well, the detective's on vacation, and then next month I'll be on vacation. And it's like, meanwhile, this young man's life is being wasted away in jail while they're going on vacation. It's enraging.
It is. And, even to hear about it, it's awful.
Yeah.
You would think that there'd be not. Well, okay.
Yeah. And the one time I let him know, like, how upset I was for him, that letter was sent back to me. Because they would not deliver it to him. Yeah. Well, I understand. They don't want something that might upset, somebody, and, give them a hard time. So, well,
also, you don't want to, I'm sure they don't want somebody upset enough to take some kind of negative action.
Right.
To be motivated to, okay.
Right.
Well, I want to thank you for doing this with me.
So
interesting about your family and
you're welcome.
How wonderful that you're teaching. Yes. And I did read somewhere that you had assigned Kafka.
Oh yeah, every year. Yeah, Metamorphosis.
I was going to say Gregor Samsa would be a perfect person to identify with.
Yeah, I mean, also, I think Lightman was very much inspired by the work of Kafka. There is something very Kafkaesque in the lives of these people, and then this character, Davey, whose brother, who
Well,
drives down the street, he freaks out because he feels, on some level, he feels perhaps that it's come for him.
Yes. Yes. People who are trapped.
Yeah, he's trapped inside his mind. I always felt that way about my brother, that there was another person in there and he was trapped.
Sure.
And when he passed away, I felt like he was released. I actually felt like I could, there was a closeness I could have with him because it wasn't obscured by his illness.
How beautifully put. Yes. Well, thank you, dear.
Thank you.
This has been really nice hearing from you. And say once more, Lightman.
Lightman.
And we can order it at Amazon.
Yeah, you should be I know the ebook is available. I think the printed book, I think you can pre-order right now.
Okay.
But
good,
pre-order it. Get your copy.
Okay, good. Thank you. Well,
all right, thank you.
Safe drive. And
thanks.
We may talk again someday.
Hopefully, yeah. Love to talk to you again. Take care.
Thank you for sharing it all.
Thanks. Bye.
Till next time, this is Janet Gowan and Larry Strauss saying goodbye. Bye.